6:30.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Phil Stasek, past president of the Space Coast Progressive Alliance. And this is our first Thursday for May. We want to welcome all of you for joining us tonight. This program tonight is one that is so important. The Space Coast Progressive Alliance advocates for many different things, but I'll tell you what, advocating for young people, for the youth of our nation, is probably one of the most important things that a person can do. The children are our future. Tonight's program is called Vultures, Devouring Public Schools. Now, you may wonder what that means, but the essence is this. We understand that knowledge is power. When human beings are trained, when educated, when they learn effectively as young people and become well-educated adults, they make better decisions. They're more productive. They contribute to our society in ways that benefit all of us. Now, in America, we've had a very good history of public education, educating everyone, no matter what your religious background, no matter what your financial background. The idea that everyone gets a fair shake, at least in the lower grades, is something that has really benefited our nation over the years. But there are people who hate public education. They may not say it out loud, but in reality, they've worked very effectively for at least 70 years, maybe longer, to whittle away at the power of public education in our country. The latest mechanism of doing that is to issue vouchers to parents of children so that they can go to schools other than the public school system. And what this does is this rips money away from our public school system and makes it less effective. There are many ways that that happens, and we have two wonderful people tonight, two experts in the field, who are going to be talking about how this happens, perhaps why it's happening, and maybe what you can do to fight this. Vouchers have been a tool to whittle away the power of public schools for some time. And I think people need to understand this. And we hope that if you're here tonight watching because you care, we hope that you'll spread the word to other people about these systems that literally, if you can imagine a vulture circling over a dying public school, it's an ugly picture, and it's something that people need to understand is happening. We have before we get to our, let me quickly introduce our two speakers tonight. Dr. Noreen Dollard. She is a senior political analyst from the Florida Policy Institute and the director of Kids Count. We also have Vanessa Skipper, vice president of the Brevard Federation of Teachers, also an experienced public school teacher. In fact, she was a finalist for Teacher of the Year here in Brevard County a few years back. So a good teacher and someone who cares deeply about the children and the teachers who teach them. First, we need to get to some business. I'd like to hand over to our president, Karen Houston. Karen, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Phil. And I'm so happy to see you back. We've truly missed you. I'm not the person taking over your spot, believe me, but Phil has always been here for us. He's a wonderful host, and I'm thankful for him. And I'm also thankful for our Action Projects Committee, chaired by Janice Moran. Janice is the one that got to this. Oh God, I'm stammering tonight. Janice is the producer of this program tonight, and it's a valuable program that we all need to adhere to, pay attention to, and see what's happening to our schools. And the Action Project Committee is an entire team that puts our events together every month, and I'm thankful for them. We could always use your help if you're interested in the Action Project Committee. You can reach out to Jan. Okay. Our next event will be Your Vote, Your Voice. We've had this particular title before, but it's just as important this time as it was every time, and that will be on Thursday, June 6th. So we hope that you'll join us on June 6th for Your Vote, Your Voice. And you can always check us out on scpaflorida.com. That's scpaflorida Florida.com. And for now, I'm going to turn it over to our treasurer, Carol Becker, to give you a little more information on how you can join SCPA. Carol?
Hi, I'm Carol Becker. Um, you can join SCPA by going to our website as Karen described. And family memberships are $35, individual memberships $25, student memberships $10, and you can always donate any amount via that method. You can also mail in a check. I don't have, there's a post office box number. Does anybody have that number? Because I'm not at home right now. I'm flying from Las Vegas, so I'm in Las Vegas.
I think the best thing to say is just go to our website at www.scpaflorida.com.
Right. And there, all that information is there on the website. So that's good.
Thank you, Carol. At this moment, I'd like to recognize the passing of our former SCPA president, Bill Whitehead. He passed away on April 7th. And so we certainly give our condolences to his wife, Karen, and family. And she's still a good friend of a lot of our members here at SCPA. And they'll have a memorial service on June 1st at 2 p.m. at the UU Friendship Fellowship of Melbourne. Details can be found on the website as well. And as always, we always ask our guests to give us action items. And we ask you, those of you who are listening right now, and those that are going to watch this later, to please take action. They're here to give us information that we need, that we're concerned about, especially with schools. I would really bet that 99% of us probably went to public schools. So, and I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for the children that followed me, my children, my child, I should say. So, whenever our guests give you an action item, please pay attention to it and share it. So I'm going to turn this back over to Phil, and we're going to get on with our program tonight. Thank you all for being here. I think I didn't say thank you to our wonderful presenters tonight. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much, Karen. We really appreciate your work and your sacrifice to keep the Space Coast Progressive Alliance ticking. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary of serving our community, and it has been a couple of very interesting decades, I must say. And who would have ever thought that we would find ourselves where we are today? It is, as they say, may you live in interesting times. Oh my. It really is amazing. And this is our opportunity to open the mic to our local community organizations, people that have community announcements. I know that we have a couple of folks that have things that they'd like to talk about. I know the League of Women Voters is going to be having an event in Suntree on June 3rd. I believe Suzanne Taylor is here. Suzanne, would you like to talk about your event?
I am, yes, thank you. Just very briefly, we're having an event called a Forum on Citizens Initiatives to talk about some of the citizens initiatives and the process, most importantly, statewide as well as in Brevard County. The one that everyone's familiar with now is the Citizens Initiative on the abortion rights to amend our Constitution. Clean water was another one that was pending before and is pending again. So that's the process that we're talking about, and it's a way for the people to ensure that the laws that they want passed and that the constitutional amendments they want passed actually happen, even when politicians refuse to take action. So that's what that'll be about. And you can look on our website, League of Women Voters, Space Coast, and the registration page will be open soon. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. We are looking forward to having Suzanne as a speaker at an upcoming event as well. In fact, I think the rest of this year, our organization is going to be focusing a lot on issues of voting, things that you'll be voting on, what you're going to find on the ballots. And so throughout the rest of 2024, as we approach the election in November, please stay tuned because we have some experts in the field that are going to be here to talk to you about these things that many of us don't know are coming, things that will be on the ballot, issues that are raging right now. Some of them we've seen on television and might have seen in the paper or read about in your social media feed. But I'll tell you what, it's time to take this seriously because we have to be ready for this election. This is a very, very, very important election for many reasons, obviously. The Indian River Lagoon Coalition already reached out and asked that we make an announcement to remind people that the Save Our Indian River Lagoon effort, the half-cent sales tax that we've been paying for over the past couple of years, actually is resulting in some excellent projects being completed. And frankly, they want everybody to know that there are analyses that are going on around the Indian River Lagoon, and we're actually starting to see areas where seagrasses are coming back, where water clarity is improving a little bit. It's not going to happen overnight, and everybody needs to understand that this is going to be a long-term project, and we all need to continue to be careful that we don't over-fertilize our lawns and stuff like that. So they want us to just kind of make an announcement to everybody, and they will probably be continuing to be reminding everybody, educating everybody about the value of preserving the Indian River Lagoon. Do we have any other community announcements? Anybody who's running for office who would like to make an announcement? I see Dan McDowell. Would you like to make an announcement since you're here tonight?
Sure. Thank you, Phil. Welcome, everyone. I'm Councilman McDowell from West Melbourne. I'm also running for congressional seat Florida 8, which is all of Brevard, Indian River, and a little bit of Orange County. So welcome, everyone. And if you don't know, I've also was elected to head to Chicago to be a Democratic convention delegate. So I'm pretty excited about that come August. And I'm a community organizer and activist. And, you know, my platform is basically pro-choice, affordability, gun safety, and saving our environment, as well as ending this toxic politics we're dealing with. So obviously, I know Vanessa, and I'm looking forward to hearing the program. Very big advocate of the education program. Was on the bus with us. I was on the bus to Tallahassee with the educators. So looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Good luck. And I remember when I was a little kid, we moved to Chicago in 1968. And of course, that was the summer of unrest. The Democratic National Convention up there was tough, to put it bluntly. And we're going to be counting on you, Daniel, to make sure that things stay quiet.
Well, it
smooth,
is my hometown, Phil. That is my hometown. So I'll try to behave.
up in the Windy City. Have fun, buddy. Any other community announcements here? Anybody that has something for the good of the community? I'm not sure that I'm seeing any hands. If anybody,
We
by
do
the way,
have another candidate. There she is.
who do we
Hey,
have?
everybody. Ava Taylor. Sorry, I'm driving.
Oh, it's great to have you. Fantastic, Ebony. It's great to have you. Yay.
Yes, thank you for the invite. Yes, I'm Dr. Ava Taylor, and I'm running for the school board for District 4. And I'm just here to listen and get some more information to help me as I go out and try to advocate for these kids and teachers.
And do you have a website that people can go to learn more about your what your issues are and how they can help you?
Yes, it is avenistaylor.com.
Alrighty, everybody. And of course, it has to be made clear the Space Coast Progressive Alliance does not endorse candidates. We are nonpartisan. But you know what? We really believe that it's important to support candidates in elections. It's important to take part in the democratic process in your community. You've certainly heard me say it over the years if you follow the SCPA, and that is pick a candidate. And it doesn't matter who they are, what your issues are, what you're interested in. Please just do something. You know, pick a candidate, follow what they're doing, maybe help them with your time or your money, but participate in our democracy, and our democracy will be strong. So thank you. Thanks to all of our candidates for being here. Hey, I'd also like to remind everybody that we do have a rocket launch tonight, 9:49 p.m. off of Space Launch Complex 40, Slick 40 at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, a Falcon 9 carrying Starlink satellites. So if you like to see a night launch, looks like pretty good weather for a good night launch tonight. So let us begin.
Phil,
Vulture. Yes.
I see Phil Moore here. Is he running for office this year? No?
I don't believe he is, but it's great to see Phil. Phil, you're not running for office, are you? I don't know if you can unmute yourself, Phil.
No, hello, everybody. No, I'm not. Not this time.
Not this time.
It's great to see you, buddy. Yeah.
Glad to be here.
So anyway, it's time for us to begin our program this evening. Once again, for those of you that have just joined us, my name is Phil Stasek. I am the past president of the Space Coast Progressive Alliance, and you are on the Space Coast Progressive Alliance First Thursday event for May. and it's called Vultures, Devouring Public Schools. It is essential that everyone understands the value of public education to our community, to our nation, and to our world. There are people who do not want our public education system to be strong. There are people who do not like contributing to the public education of other children. There are people who have all sorts of strange ideas about where they think education should be. But our nation is strong because we have valued from the very beginning, our founding fathers valued the power of education. The knowledge is power, and that the more educated our community, the stronger our nation will be. In fact, we know that this is a value to everyone in the world, not just in our nation. So public education is something that we all should value. We have two wonderful experts tonight who are going to be talking about the threats to public education and what's been going on. Our first will be Dr. Noreen Dollard. She is the Senior Policy Analyst from the Florida Policy Institute and the Director of Kids Count. She'll be followed by Vanessa Skipper, who is the Vice President of the Brevard Federation of Teachers here in Brevard County and an experienced public teacher herself. She was a finalist for being Teacher of the Year here in Brevard County a few years back. So she's a good teacher, and representing other teachers is a calling, I have to say. It is wonderful to have you guys. I'm going to just hand the floor over to Dr. Noreen Dollard. You have the floor.
There we go. You'd think after 4 years I would learn to unmute myself, but I still struggle.
You sound
Thank
great.
you so much for having me. I am with the Florida Policy Institute, and a little bit about us. Hold on. Let's see. Okay. So just a little overview here. Give you a sense of the cost, what our experience has been in Florida, what we have learned from both research and advocates. And I was asked to make sure there was something for you to take away to go home and do. You didn't have to ask, but I'm glad you did. And I'll be sure to share some things that I think can help us in our work on vouchers. And I think we're holding Q&A until after both presentations. Is that right? Yeah.
That is correct. Yes, we'll be holding, and I should announce that to everybody that's here. That is, we're looking forward to handing the floor over to all of our guests to ask questions of our expert panels after the second speaker, after Vanessa Skipper speaks. So yes, you got it right.
Great, thank you. So let me tell you a little bit about the Florida Policy Institute. We're an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. Our mission is to support and improve the economic mobility and quality of life for all Floridians. We are a research group, and we also engage in strategic outreach so that we can get our message, our work, policy analysis into the hands of people who can do something with it. We never work alone. We always work in partnership with others who are in this space. For example, FEA, the Florida Education Association, Vanessa and I were talking about earlier. And we are our policy advocates. Our focus is really budget, tax, and revenue policy and how that affects Floridians. And that's how I'll be talking about vouchers, is the cost, the budgetary implications. This is our team. We work across the issue areas in healthcare, housing, worker justice, immigrant justice, safety net. So things like SNAP, which is nutrition assistance, cash payments. We work tax and revenue, of course, and criminal and juvenile justice. And soon we're adding an analyst who works on environmental justice. So we touch a lot of different areas of life. We conduct high quality, credible research to advance our policy. We have policy recommendations always. We want people to do things with our research. We educate policymakers, we educate the public, and really just try to be smart in our public policy in a way that will benefit all Floridians. I am the education analyst as well as the kids count director for Florida, which is so the two things kind of, there's a confluence there. Kids count is dedicated to providing reliable data on child well-being to people who make decisions around kids, legislators, school boards, any level of government. And then I'm the education and early learning analyst. And so tonight these come together here in terms of data and putting the accurate information into the hands of people like you. So vouchers, which are euphemistically called scholarships in our state, we've had them since the 1990s under Jeb Bush. And vouchers have a way of expanding sort of the camel's nose under the tent, you know, just little by little. It's a small population. And so it starts small and it builds and it builds. In Florida, as in other places, it was, well, we're only going to use these dollars to for students who are in struggling schools, or we're only going to use these dollars for students of low economic income, or we're only going to use these dollars for students with disabilities. And so over time, you know, more and more students became eligible for these vouchers. In 2019, students up to 375% of the federal poverty level were able to access these vouchers. And these are, you know, these are family for, it's well over $100,000. It is 375% of federal poverty level. Those are called the Family Empowerment Scholarships. And those funds come directly from your tax dollars that are dedicated to education. We have something called the Florida Tax Credit since 2001, that the eligibility and operations are exactly the same as the Family Empowerment Scholarships, but that's revenue that's diverted from our general revenue, our taxes. And I'll get into that a little bit more as we go along. Our three largest voucher programs in Florida are the Family Empowerment Scholarships for students for educational options. And so these are education savings accounts paid through parents. It's sort of like a line of credit that parents can use for tuition and fees. The Family Empowerment Scholarships for unique abilities are for students with disabilities to use for approved educational uses. And then like the Florida Tax Credit. Like the Family Empowerment Scholarships, they do go directly to parents, but they must go first to tuition. So as I said, we had been at 375% of the federal poverty level. Is a pretty generous benefit already. But last year, HB 1, House Bill 1, expanded the eligibility for these vouchers to all Florida residents, regardless of their incomes. Now, there's a priority given to families earning up to 185% of poverty, and a second priority area where families who earn up to 400% for a family of 4. But if everybody's eligible, I'm not really sure what priority actually means in that case. It increased the growth cap for students with disabilities. So formerly 1% of the total special education population was eligible every year, would increase by 1%. Well, that went up to 3%, and is now has increased even further, and I'll get to that in a little bit. And something that HB 1 did, which had never been the case before, was it made homeschool children eligible for vouchers through something called a personalized education program. And this school year, up to 20,000 students, homeschool students statewide, were eligible. Next year, 40,000, an additional 40,000. The following year, an additional 40,000, and then there'll be no cap on homeschool students after that time. So we have something called the Florida Education Finance Program, which is a very complicated formula, but it was really a flagship concept when it was introduced, because it's really intended to make education funding equitable, regardless of what grade you're in, what district you're in. Do you live in a small rural district? Do you live in a large urban district? Do you live somewhere in between? So it really takes into account a number of different factors to try to equalize funding across the state. The Florida Education Finance Program, as I said earlier, this is general revenue. So your tax dollars go to the government, and those dollars that are earmarked for education, for K-12, most of those fall under the Florida Education Finance Program. The scholarships are base amount allocated to districts on a per pupil basis, and they are exactly the same for students in public schools as they are for students who receive these vouchers to go to private schools or for homeschooling. Next year, in the current budget that will be sent to the governor, hasn't been sent yet, that's nearly $9,000 per pupil on average. So pretty generous. The Florida tax credit, as I said, there are tax credits that go to eligible businesses, and those dollars, the business gets a credit, and those dollars are used to fund the Florida tax credit. So they are still a diversion from public education and for that matter, all governmental activity, because they're diverted from general revenue to vouchers. These are allowable expenses, tuition and fees, transportation, instructional materials, curriculum, some post-secondary education and apprentice programs, kids who are in private school and homeschool. There's not much accountability, but they do have to take standardized norm reference tests once a year, and eventually the homeschool students will be brought into that as well, but AP exams and other kinds of certifications. The people who receive vouchers can actually contract with public schools to, they won't be considered in public schools, but if they want to take an AP course or they want to, be part of a team or some kind of athletic activity, they would be eligible. There's relatively little restriction on these expenses. This year, HB 1403, entitled School Choice. What this bill was intended to do was to put pretty minimal guardrails, but at least some guardrails on expenditures, and what these things, what would the approved uses be for these funds. And it went through all the committee stops in the House, it went through 2 in the Senate, and at the very last minute, literally 2 days before the end of session, a strike all amendment, virtually strike all, was introduced that removed what little guardrails had been put on voucher expenditures and restricted them to use only for core curricular areas of reading, math, science, and social studies. And what this strike all did essentially was, it got rid of those very minimal guardrails that had been placed on voucher expenditure. It also did some other things, just to clarify. I mean, HB1 was massive. It's a massive bill, and we'll get to the cost in a moment. But as with any piece of legislation, there are bound to be implementation issues, and that was certainly true of 2023's HB1. So this affords eligibility to some active duty military. It clarifies what constitutes full-time enrollment, because PEP students, the homeschool students, were encountering issues of being told that they were actually attending schools, and so they couldn't get their vouchers. Something that was subject to a special session last fall were the parents of students with disabilities who were not getting their needs met, and so there was a very big waiting list, and they essentially clear the waiting list for these students with disabilities. So they have now this year increased the cap from 3% to 5% of the entire special education population is the increase each year. There's also some smaller scholarships called New World scholarships that are for students in public schools, about $500, not about, it's $500, and it is for reading materials for students who are struggling with their reading. There are also what they call transportation scholarships, which are also for students in public schools who want to go to a school that they are not zoned for. But in the scheme of things, this is not a huge expenditure. The other guardrails were also early during committee weeks in December. They brought these scholarship funding organizations to the committees, and these scholarship funding organizations are the ones who actually manage disbursement of funds. They are not the Department of Education. They are nonprofit C3 organizations, and people weren't getting their checks in on time. In school, private schools were closing down and doing sorts of extreme things to make payroll and so on. And so they were called, I won't say to account, but they were at least asked to comment on how they had planned to deal with this huge expansion in eligibility. So there were some small, in my opinion, small requirements which put actual deadlines on when they have to get checks out to parents and to schools. And it also requires more for them to publish purchasing guidelines for what's allowable and prohibited. This is a picture of Florida voucher spending. You can see it's grown quite astronomically. And there's been various voucher programs over time called different things until today, when we get to the three main voucher programs. One second, there, okay. Here's another look at how this expansion has happened. You can see in the family empowerment scholarships, and these are statewide data. We'll come to Brevard in a moment. There is increase of over 50% in the family empowerment scholarships for educational options, 39% in the scholarships for students with disabilities, because there is a cap, numeric cap on how many can receive those scholarships. 30%.
Noreen, could I interrupt for 1 second?
Yeah.
Your previous slide only flashed up on the screen for maybe a second or two. I am not sure what happened there, but we only got it for just a moment. Could you go back to your last slide for just 1 moment?
Sure.
That slide only appeared for just a moment. At least it did for me.
Oh, okay. So you can see where there's a huge uptick as they expanded and this was for actually for last year was $2 billion is what they spent before the actual expansion to Universal. And I spent most of last year on the fiscal implications of HB1, and we did an analysis based on data from other states. And this is part of that analysis. You know, how many kids were from private schools were, you know, applying for vouchers, and and we did an estimate, and we said it's going to cost $4 billion. Well, that is now actually the amount in the budget for next year. They are finally, I would say, being honest about what vouchers actually cost. And last year they were not being forthcoming about the cost of vouchers.
Thank you.
And here you can see that this is the numeric increase in numbers of students, how much they've increased over time. And for the whole program, both the family empowerment scholarships and the Florida tax credit scholarships, it's, you know, it's over 45% increase over time. And here you see that same picture, just presented differently, just in a different format, really. But you can see where the huge uptake is in these scholarships.
And Dr. Dolan, I'm not sure. We're still on the bar graph.
Oh, I see. You're right. I'm sorry.
There we go.
There we are. Sorry. Sometimes it looks fine here. It's not over there. So sorry about that. This is just a different way of looking at the huge increase in scholarships over time. So are we looking at estimated costs, Brevard? You can give me a thumbs up, Phil. Is that what you see? All right, great.
Yes.
That's good. Thank you.
We are updating our analysis now, because one thing about our budget and the numbers are there if you dig for them, but they are not accessible. They're not transparent. You know, I deal with numbers all the time, and so, and even for me, our budget is over 500 pages long. And that's not even all of it. It has another implementing bill that tells us how to implement the bill. It incorporates a 40-page document on the Florida Education Finance Program. And then there's other reports in other places. And when you put all these things together, you can start to get a picture of what's going on, but is not accessible to the general public, I would argue, and I have. To our Department of Education. And you can see here how much the costs are to the Brevard schools and this is just for FES, the Family Empowerment Scholarships. It does not include the Florida tax credit funding, because the Department of Education has not published its quarterly reports since last June. And those reports contain students and expenditures for the Florida tax credit. We have done a Freedom of Information Act request. So we'll see. Hopefully I can update these for you. But just as we saw with the state overall, there's been, you know, almost a 25% increase just till this year in the Florida tax credit. The educational options, which are the ones that are just for anyone eligible for K-12, there's just a little bit of an decrease in the scholarships awarded to students with unique abilities, but it's 20 students. So I wouldn't call that significant necessarily. But overall, it's a 40% increase in students just so in a 1-year period. and we expect that will continue to rise. These are the numbers, the 24-25 column come from the Florida Education Finance Program report that will go forward with the budget when it goes to the governor. Something else, oh, I see I have 5 minutes, so let me step it up a little bit. What you should know is that many of the scholarships, 70% of the scholarship new applications were from students who are already in private schools or were kindergartners, so never in the public education system. This is actually from last August, but this is Doug Tuthill. He's just stepped down as the CEO of Step Up for Students, which administers the lion's share of vouchers here in our state, but also in other states. And they, as you see, they received over 400,000 scholarship. They awarded that many. It's not enrolled. We're quick to point out that doesn't mean they spent them, the scholarships, but that's how many were awarded. You may remember last summer, there were a number of different news articles, at least in Central Florida and on my side of Florida, that were asking, are these allowable expenditures? How could this be right? My kid in public school doesn't have a kayaks, and if they go to Disney World on a field trip, it's because I as a parent pay for them to go. And here the vouchers are paying for such expenditures for students, for private and homeschool students. I want to take a minute, or why do we oppose? This I stole from our friends at the Education Law Center, Public Funds for Public School Initiative. And the reason, and this goes to Phil's introduction initially, is that we care because public education is a cornerstone of our democracy. We believe all students deserve access to public schools, and voucher funding diverts from this goal. Florida is a chronically underfunded state in terms of education. You probably saw we're ranked now 50th in average teacher pay. I hope I'm not stealing Vanessa's thunder on that one, but she'll give you a lot more insight into that. The other thing is that research says that vouchers cause harm. It undermines public schools. It's actually contributing to resegregation of schools because, for example, students with disabilities, when they accept a voucher, they are giving up their civil rights to a free and appropriate education. And private schools are under no obligation to take them and to be able to fully meet their needs. So they go back to public schools. So that's a very big concern. Students using vouchers do fare worse academically in comparison to learning loss due to Katrina, to COVID. Actually, students who receive vouchers fare worse academically than natural disasters and pandemics. And there's a serious lack of standards, accountability, and transparency, which I could talk about for some other time. I'll come back and talk in depth about that. But let me just close with talking about what you can do and start, and then turn it to Vanessa. So for one, insist on fully funding public schools. We are not holding harmless, which is something you will hear, that you will hear people say that. Your legislators, they're running, as you met in the introductions, people are running for school board, for legislators, I'm sure county commissions, I know they are here. So people who have influence over the process. You need to educate parents that you might take this voucher and you're thinking, oh, I'm going to go to the very most exclusive school in Brevard County, whatever that is. And chances are the vouchers will not cover those expense, and those expenses will still fall to the parents to make up the difference. Like I said, there's issues of for kids with disabilities and who don't, who don't look like others. Their hairstyles are different. They have two moms, and other things like that. They don't have to, private schools don't have an obligation to take them, whereas public schools do. We absolutely need to advocate for greater accountability, and that's something you can do. Right now is call your legislators, either the ones that are running, the ones, who are it's off cycle, talk to them while they're home this summer and say, we need accountability. Something is wrong here. Public schools, the credentials of their teachers, they have to be licensed, accredited, and private schools do not. Maybe say only schools with high performance can participate. And align with businesses that support public schools. It's being done in Idaho. There's another state, it's escaping me, but the business community needs a strong workforce. And if we are taking away from public education, we are not preparing what are still the vast majority of students are in public schools. This is less of an issue for Brevard County, but engaging in rural communities because they are adversely affected by vouchers, because the money goes out and there is no choice for many rural areas. And finally, we have to fight the narrative that just because you pay for it, it's better. Public schools, they take all students. That's what the beauty of them are. They are the centers of our community. In many cases, it's, we go and vote there, or we go to the Friday night football games, or there's a food pantry or that sort of thing. So really focusing on what Karen said at the beginning. She's a product of public schools. I'm a product of public schools. And we really need to defend that. So I'm going to stop there and turn it over to Vanessa.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dollard. I do appreciate that. And indeed, the numbers don't lie. When we steal from our public schools, we all pay the price. I guess that's the simplest way to put it, is literally we're stealing from Peter to pay Paul, and it's a folly. It is important that we look at the numbers, that we know the numbers, and thank you for being here, because those numbers are hard to find. How do you find this data? It's just not readily available to the general public. And so having somebody like you here tonight to help point this out to us is very, very important. So thank you again. Believe me, you'd be getting a good round of applause if we were in a live meeting right now. Thank you very, very much. And again, to everyone that is listening, if you've just joined us, you are on the first Thursday event from May from the Space Coast Progressive Alliance. It's called Vultures, Devouring Public Schools. Two wonderful speakers tonight. You just heard Dr. Noreen Dollard. She's a PhD senior policy analyst with Florida Policy Institute and director of Kids Count. We are so lucky to have had you here speaking at the beginning. For everyone else that's here, that's monitoring this, for both of our speakers, they'll be able to take questions. The Q&A session will begin after our next speaker completes. And our next speaker is Vanessa Skipper. She's the vice president of the Brevard Federation of Teachers, a teacher herself, representing our teachers, representing our students. Vanessa, it is wonderful to have you here. Wonderful to have you back. I know we've had you as a guest previously, I believe, on for the SCPA, and we want to say welcome aboard. You have the floor.
Thank you, Phil, and thank you, Noreen, for setting up this conversation. I'm going to try and bring it kind of home to Brevard, what it means to us here. We'll speak a little bit globally for statewide as well. I'm really happy for the invitation. I am also a product of public schools. When my dad was in the military, I did spend some time in private and homeschool. So I have kind of like the whole spectrum of it, but I went to Edgewood Junior High before it was a school of choice, and graduated from Merritt Island High School. Both of my children are products of BPS. My youngest actually is a junior at Merritt Island now. And so this is my community. I'm dedicated to making it better. Sometimes it feels like, you know, we take a step forward and then we take like 25 steps back, but it's encouraging to me to have groups like the Space Coast Progressive Alliance and everyone that showed up tonight to listen about vouchers and to see what individually or collectively we can do to make a difference. I started my career in 2006 teaching at Andrew Jackson Middle School in Titusville, English and language arts, and then went down to Cocoa High where I spent 9 years teaching English and journalism before I left the classroom to be the vice president of the Brevard Federation of Teachers. If you don't know about us, we've been around since 1970. We formed our charter 2 years after the statewide teacher walkout that actually enshrined collective bargaining into the Florida Constitution. And we have been fighting for education in this county ever since. It's been we've been negotiating our contract for 54 years. I always say that I stand on the shoulders of giants for everyone that has come before me in my position and fought for public education. We're here, I think, because we all believe that Brevard's children have a right to a free and appropriate public education, regardless of their ability, regardless of their zip code, regardless of their origin or what they look like. And I think too many times, you know, the way vouchers are advertised to us are that they are, you know, for students with disabilities, or to offer the idea of choice, or to get students out of their failing neighborhood schools. And really the truth of the matter, and this is probably a whole separate talk, but if you look at vouchers and charter schools, the idea of both of these things where they were supposed to offer something new, something different, something better for students. And really what we're finding is it's just offering the rich an opportunity to educate their students where they want to choose to educate them. You know, we don't look at our park system or our police system or our fire system and say, hey, you know what? I don't really want to use that firehouse down the way from my house. I would like my own special firehouse. So I want you know, some money from the state to purchase my own fire engine that's only going to come to my house or just my little HOA neighborhood. It's just not how that works. But it is pretty much the way vouchers have evolved in our state. And really, the politicians have just ever since, you know, I've started teaching, it seems like they've just come in this, especially in the state, and just decimated what we're doing. They're demanding, you know, what we should teach or what we shouldn't teach. And all under the guise that we're failing, that public schools are failing. But when you look at who's actually using the vouchers, and Noreen touched on this, I muted myself, sorry guys. There's a website called edchoice.org, and this website is actually dedicated to helping people find these scholarships in their states and use choice. But so I have edchoice.org. Their mission is to advance educational freedom and choice for all as a pathway to successful lives and a stronger society. They put out a survey to parents that are using vouchers. And in this survey, over 2/3 of the parents that answered in the survey are not choosing to use vouchers because their neighborhood schools are failing. They're choosing to use vouchers because they want their children educated in a religious environment. And what we're seeing in Florida as the voucher system has expanded, like Noreen said, these students they've never stepped foot in a public school and they're taking these scholarships. These students are and families that are making over $150,000 a year. So they're using these private vouchers, not because they want to flee their neighborhood school or a failing school. They're using them because they want to subsidize their amount that they're paying for their private tuition. It kind of brings to mind constantly with me, the idea of separation of church and state, which we know that line is completely blurred with the amount of money that we're seeing funneled into private schools. And now the idea that this money can be used for homeschool students. Parents might choose to homeschool their kids, but what a lot of people don't know, and I'm not necessarily saying that this is a bad thing, so I want to couch that some of what I'm saying I don't believe is a negative thing. So homeschool students in Brevard have to have access to be able to play sports at our schools, to be able to participate in music like band, orchestra, chorus, all those extracurricular and co-curricular items that are available in our public schools, the homeschool students have access to. So the way it might look in a high school is a student chooses to take band, they show up for 6th period every day at the high school and they take band. None of that money is going to that school. That homeschool student is taking all of that money. Now, again, I believe that they should be able to access the wonderful things that public schools have to offer. But what I don't think should happen is the siphoning of the money away from our public schools. What is also really frustrating for educators is that these schools that are receiving the vouchers, they don't have to take the FAST, which is the new Florida test. It's called the Florida Assessment of Student Thinking. We've had many iterations of standardized testing over my years in education. And we could probably do a whole nother talk on the ills of standardized testing and grading schools. Florida is the last time I looked, one of 13 states that still assigns a letter grade to schools. And they do it in such an elementary manner that you could have an A school that still has a significant population of failing students in English and math, but I digress. The point is that these private schools that are taking these vouchers do not have to take the state standardized test. Now, there is something in the law, or the way it was written, where they say, hey, choose from this list of nationally normed reference tests and then report the assessment data to us. But with that same breath, the Florida Department of Education says the legislative intent is not to regulate, control, approve, or accredit private educational institutions, churches, their ministries, religious instructions, freedoms, or rights. So they could say, hey, you should assess these students and you should report this assessment data to us, but they don't have to, and there's no penalty if they don't. So there are way more private schools receiving these vouchers that don't assess, or if they do assess, they're not reporting the assessment data. And really, since private schools also don't have to be accredited, they don't have to hire certified teachers, they don't have to fingerprint or make sure that there's background checks done on the people that work there. They don't have to follow curriculum standards. They can teach whatever curriculum they want. They don't have to have any sort of measure of comparable progress between what their students are doing in the private school compared to what their students are doing in the public school. None of that happens. And what we find is within the first year of a student taking a voucher, a third of them are back into our public schools. And after a couple years, more than half of them are back into our public schools. And when they come back, they're significantly behind their peers. And this is a huge issue, because not only have vouchers not done what they said they were going to do, and that's provide a better education to students. So in the end, the student loses because they're behind. But also in the state of Florida, teachers' evaluations are tied into student test scores. And not only are their evaluations tied into student test scores, but their pay raises are tied into student test scores. So it's like a 1-2 punch, right? We're losing the money, which means we're underfunded. We're getting the students back, and sometimes we get the students back. We have these different times during the year where we do student counts, and then they give us their funding based on those student counts. So a lot of times these private schools will expel, kick out the kid, whatever they do, after they've received the payment from the state. So then the student comes to us, and of course, public schools, we educate everyone. No matter where you come from, no matter what your zip code is, no matter what, public schools educate everyone. So when you show up on our doorstep on March 25th, and that private school has already received all the money for the year for you, we are going to educate you for the rest of the year. And the students are going to still have to take the FAST test, or whatever test, you know, because Florida changes their tests every few years. Whatever tests Florida decides that we're going to take next, those students still have to test. I took a cursory glance at the websites of 4 private schools in Brevard that are receiving tax scholarship vouchers. And before I go through this, at the risk of, I'm probably going to sound a little snarky, but it gets, this really gets to me. I don't, you know, everybody has a right in this country, right? We have freedom of religion. You can choose where you want to worship, how you want to worship, whether or not you want to worship at all. That's one of the, obviously the freedoms afforded to us. And so one of the things that really, really bugs me about these private school vouchers is the idea that they discriminate against people from all walks of life. So these are 4 schools that actually reported assessment data to the state. And you know, the latest report on the DOE website was from 2021. I feel like there should be more up-to-date one, but I couldn't find one. But of the 4, there was actually 5 schools on there. One of them is closed now. Of the 4 schools that I looked at, only one of them had a positive growth data as far as reading and math. The rest of them had a negative decline in reading and math schools. But on the loading page for Temple Christian School, as soon as it loads, it says, where the education of the spirit is the spirit of education. Tax money doesn't belong in public school, or in this school. Taxpayer money does not belong in a school where, when the page loads, it says where the education of the spirit is the spirit of education. The ethics policy for Temple Christian School glaringly omits gender and sexual orientation from their ethics policy. Glaringly admits it from it. Taxpayer money doesn't belong in this school. At St. Joseph Catholic School in Palm Bay, students can be denied admission. Noreen touched on this. In public schools, we have to admit everyone. In this particular school, in order to get admitted, you have to tour the school. You have to bring copies of your report cards, your learning accommodation information, and documents that show academic process. If for some reason you were accepted into the school and you have an IEP or a 504, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to follow those guidelines. In fact, they can take a look at it and say, yeah, no, we're not going to take you. They say if they don't accept the student, this was the kicker, they will recommend the student to attend another school that may be a better fit. They are handpicking the students that they want to go there. And that's just discrimination in a nutshell. Taxpayer money doesn't belong in that school. This is the only school that didn't report declines in their reading and math scores. And I would imagine it's because they get to handpick the kids that go there. Taxpayer money doesn't belong in that school. At Calvary Chapel Academy, their mission is to partner with parents who are active Christ followers to provide quality Christian education and to prepare students for a lifetime of fruitful Christian service. Taxpayer doesn't belong in the school. They also, on the school website, not the church website, they tout the following about marriage. We believe that God created mankind male and female. Men and women are both created in the image of God. God instituted monogamous marriage between male and female. Taxpayer money doesn't belong in that school. And finally, the last one I looked at was West Melbourne Christian Academy. The Bible, God's truth, is the foundation for all aspects of our academy. God's truth will be the basis of a balanced curriculum from which students will learn Christianity as a way of life. If people want to have their children educated in private schools, they can do so. They have the right to choose that. What I don't think is right is the idea that they are siphoning so much of public school money to go into these schools. Noreen gave you some of the numbers for Brevard, and I'm grateful for kind of those updated numbers of the 23, 24, 24, 25, because I was digging through the, it's called the FEFP. It's the Florida Education Finance Program. It is this huge document, and you kind of have to weed through it. And really, the 23, 24, as far as vouchers are concerned, and 24, 25, you're kind of looking at a projection because we don't ultimately know. I mean, this year we have a pretty good idea of how many people, how many students did take them, the vouchers. But as of, next year, it's just going to keep growing. So you're looking at, and if my numbers are off, Noreen, please correct me, because I was kind of looking at, Florida Policy Institute is, I love you guys, by the way. And also Economic Policy Institute definitely can fall down some rabbit holes looking through all of that. But looking at the way the money has impacted this county, it's just astronomical. So you're looking at 1920, where we were spending around $12.5 million on this voucher type funding. And I want to state for the record that, the original, and I don't know if it was original, but the idea, behind some of these vouchers, when you had the McKay Scholarship, when you had students with disabilities or students with autism, and you wanted to get those specific students into a specialized school that was meant for them, that's what those scholarships were meant for. And it's just I keep muting myself, sorry. It's evolved into this huge, I think, out of control. Everybody's using these vouchers, and really we've ultimately forgotten about the students who this type of funding was meant for in the beginning. But we moved to 2021 up to about $14 million, 21, 22, around $35, $36 million in Brevard, 22, 23, $41.5 million, with a projection in 23, 24. I like your number a lot better, Noreen, because it's 51.3, and I was digging through our FEFP and I saw 77.6. I'm like, please don't let it be that much. So, and then 24, 25, a projection of $65.4 million. And when we're talking about such a huge number, right, that's hard for my English teacher brain to conceptualize, to kind of wrap my head around it. That's more money than I'll ever see in my lifetime. But when you look at the 24-25 budget, the legislature is sending Brevard an additional $5,149,664, about $5.2 million for teacher salary increase allocation. So that's how much they're sending us. When you compare that to 66 million for vouchers, and my math is probably wrong here because I did it on a little bit higher figure, but it's going to be basically the same. To put it another way, the legislature is sending, for every $1 the legislature sent to increase public school teacher salary in Brevard, they're sending another roughly $14, $15 to private school vouchers. $1 to increase teacher salary, 14 to 15 to private school vouchers in Brevard. Our legislatures tout historic raises, and you know, I'd just like to take this moment to thank everybody on this call that voted yes for millage, or have voted yes for the 0.5-cent tax in Brevard. We were able to give teachers a historic raise. We were, right? The citizens of Brevard County who voted yes on millage, and I guess those who voted no too, because they're still paying the extra tax. So thank you to those who voted no, if anybody voted no, but please vote yes when we go for renewal. But it was a historic raise. And even with that historic raise of the millage, we are still behind state average for average teacher pay. And Florida is 50th in the nation for teacher pay. We're about to go back to the negotiating table next week. We always live stream our negotiations on our Brevard Federation of Teachers YouTube page. You know, if you're bored or you need something to put you to sleep, although sometimes there are fireworks at the table, so sometimes it can get real interesting. I would encourage you to watch those negotiations, because we're coming, you know, with an offer. We fully expect the district to say no to it. And one of the excuses they will use, because it's been an excuse they've used at the table every year since these vouchers have been in place, and especially over the past 4 or 5 years as the vouchers have increased, like not even incrementally, like doubled, tripled. They say, we don't know how this is going to affect our budget, so we can't agree to a pay raise, or we can't agree to that much of a pay raise for you. A lot of people wonder why we'll start the year and we won't have a teacher contract. We will not have settled negotiations, and I guarantee you it'll be another this year where we will not have settled negotiations prior to the school year starting in August. And one of the reasons is, this is partially the district and it's partially the state of Florida, because when you're building a budget, you know, it's hard to build a budget on the unknown, but it's not impossible. And so in a time where we have historic teacher shortages, we have steadily in Brevard County been advertising for over 200 teachers the entire school year. We have teacher shortages at schools that traditionally never have openings, where people, you know, wait for an opening so that they can apply to work at that school. We have seen our hiring go from, you know, 50 teachers to a year to about 100 teachers a year to, I think we hired over 800 and 900 new teachers this year, or teachers coming from outside of the county. And so it's, public education is being destroyed because the legislature is destroying it. It's not being destroyed because it was destroying itself. The NEA came out with their rankings. Florida has dropped to 50th in average teacher salary. They are 16th in beginning teacher salary. And that is because the governor, you know, came out and said he was dedicated to raising the minimum teacher salary in the state. And for several years, the money that was sent from the legislature to increase teacher salary, we had to spend 80% of the funds on brand new teachers and 20% on our experienced veteran teachers, which has caused, honestly, in our county, teachers to flee this profession. And when you live in a county that launches rockets every day, Bill, our space industry is stealing our teachers, our math teachers, our science teachers. They're going to work for Blue Origin and SpaceX and all the contractors and Northrop Grumman. In fact, we're losing some of our art teachers and our music teachers. We lost a band teacher to Blue Origin. And so it is, it is frustrating when experience in education doesn't matter. And just to give you guys a picture, the average teacher salary in the US is $69,544. The national average beginning teacher salary is $44,530. The average teacher salary in Florida is $53,098. The average starting teacher salary in Florida is $47,178. And then now for Brevard's numbers. Brevard's average teacher salary is $50,864. That is well under the average teacher salary for Florida. And our starting teacher salary in Brevard is $48,725. The way you guys can help, as Noreen said, is stop people when they have the narrative that private is better. It's not. Public schools are not failing. The legislature is failing public schools. When you siphon that much money off, you are, I always use it, and it's just an easy visual. You've got 100 yards on a football field. You've got 20% less funding. So do you only mow, up to, you leave one end zone overgrown, and just play on half of the field? It's the same thing. Just because you might have, some students have left public schools, you're still paying to air condition the building, to keep the lights on, to keep the maintenance going. And for that, we have had some great school renewals with the half-cent tax. So I have to say, again, thank you for voting for that. Please always vote to renew that. Please always vote to renew the millage, because if those two things go away, that will really be the nail in the coffin for public education in this county. And, feel free to reach out to me. I will put my email in the chat. Pay attention to bargaining and negotiations with the school district. And, when they inevitably decline our offer next week, put some pressure on the school board members, put some pressure on the superintendent. Let them know that you're paying attention. Let them know that you care about public schools in this county, that you care about the teachers in this county. I really appreciate, again, the opportunity to speak and the opportunity to answer questions if I can. I know, Noreen, you probably have all the good data points. Like I said, the Florida Policy Institute, if you guys, please visit their website. It's an amazing wealth of information and data, and it is definitely one of my go-to places when I'm looking for information.
Well, thank you very much, Vanessa. I want to say thank you again, as I was saying before. And you know what? If this was a room full of people, we would have standing ovations for both of our speakers tonight. Vanessa, thank you so much, and of course for everyone else. For me to say, as a point of interest, whatever. My wife was a lifelong public school teacher. And she has the greatest of respect for Vanessa, and she got out of the game, frankly, because teachers are not valued in this county. Frankly, teachers are not valued around our country. There's a famous quote. I'm not sure who said this, but the quote is that words are lovely. People love to say things that in support of their teachers, their firefighters, the police, their military. But if you want to see people's real priority, show me your budget. You want to see people's real priority? What do they care about? Show me your budget. And the truth is, our elected representatives on the whole don't really care about the school kids of America. They really don't. If our people in the Florida state legislature cared about the students, the school kids, and frankly the future of our state, the state education budget would be twice or three times what it is. And so show me your budget. Let's see what your budget's like. The budget of Florida for schools is abysmal. We should all be ashamed of it. We should be ashamed of the legislators that voted for this, ashamed for the governor who signed it. Our budget is an embarrassment, a nationwide embarrassment. The fact that we're number 50 for teacher pay is disgusting. And we need to write letters. I'll tell you what, it was funny. I was just looking through a little list. I write a lot of letters to my elected representatives. I have a little file here. I was just leafing through it. Years ago, I wrote a letter. Actually, it turned out to be a couple of letters to John Bush, our governor. His friends call him Jeb. But when they first introduced this voucher program, I became so angry. I had to write a letter. And honestly, I was shocked that he wrote me back with a hand-signed letter. And then we began writing back and forth. And in the end, he essentially said, we're just going to have to agree to disagree on this. But when the governor is so personally invested in this, politically invested in the whole idea of funding anybody else who wants to do education other than our public school system, then we're in trouble. So forgive me for babbling on. What I'd like to do is I'm going to turn the floor over now to those of you that have joined us. If you're here with us, this is your chance to speak up. If you have a question to ask, whatever type of device you're using, whether it's a computer, a phone, an iPad, look for the little icon that says reactions. When you click on the reactions, you'll see a raise hand button. So if you'll do that, please, then we'll be able to identify you. We'll get you in the list. Those of you that raise hand, it's first come, first served. Whoever gets their hand up first can ask questions of our guests. And I ask that you please make it a question rather than a statement. Ask a good question and not too long, because I think we're going to have quite a few good questions tonight. So let us start. I see Jan Moran's got your hand up. Jan, take yourself off of mute and please ask your question.
I know you want me to ask a question versus making a statement, Phil, but I'm afraid it's going to be a statement. So I just want to point out that not only are teachers being asked to teach, but they're asking teachers to be cops and counselors and nurses and social workers. And they're frequently dealing with really a lot of disrespect and toxic parents. So it just really annoys me. I'm not a parent. I don't have any kids in school. But when I hear about the stuff that's going on, I just think that the burden that these teachers have to carry is unreal and just really not appreciated. So that's my comment, not a question.
I think that's going to be for you, Vanessa, to talk about the teacher with a tool belt that includes a gun and medical qualifications, psychological computation, all the things that a teacher has to do.
So, I mentioned earlier that I stand on the shoulders of giants, and I stand on those who came before me to negotiate our contract, which the Florida legislature worked very hard this year to dismantle unions. And we are in the fight of our life right now, but we believe we're going to survive. In our contract, after Sandy Hook, and I say we, I was not on the negotiating team. The negotiating team and our chief negotiator at the time, Dan Bennett, negotiated that teachers, and I say teachers, but teachers, we have a whole list of job descriptions in our contract. So teachers, counselors, social workers, occupational therapists, there's a whole list of jobs that fall under our contract. So when I use the word teachers, I'm including all of those. That teachers would not carry weapons. We have no intention of giving that up in our contract. And so while the school board is exploring expanding the Guardian program, which obviously under the legislature, they have the right to do, doesn't mean they have to do it. they will have to use others who are not members of our 5,000 member bargaining unit to do it. So, you know, that's not going to stop random, and I don't know if I should say random, that's not going to stop other people from carrying weapons, such as administrators or other job descriptions, but it won't be people from our bargaining unit.
Well, thank you very much, Vanessa. And I should ask you while we're doing this, I know that this issue of trying to force guns, well, open the door for teachers to carry guns it seems to never go away here in Brevard or around the state of Florida. I believe that it's going to come up at a school board meeting. Is it going to be this week, next week? There's some kind of a thing that's coming up. I know that this discussion seems to never end. What can you help us on that? What if we're in opposition to this, which I personally am, which school board meeting do I need to go to?
So I would just make sure that you pay attention to the agendas. They'll post it on the agenda. So, you know, if you want to speak about an agenda item that they're voting on, then that's when you speak during traditional public comment. I believe they still have public comment, and you can talk about things that aren't being voted on, so you could still go. But I would definitely, I go on the website at least once a week to look at what they've posted for the agenda, if they've added anything, you know, because they've got to notice the public first, and then, you know, they have to come back and talk about it at another meeting. I know that this is something that you know, is very divisive. And so I think that would be my best advice, is just to make sure that you're constantly looking at the agenda to see when it's going to come up, and make sure you go and sign up for public comment.
Our next speaker, our next question is coming from Gina. Gina, could I ask you to please bring your camera on, if you would? We always like to have, if you're going to ask a question of our speakers, please bring up your video. So start video if you would. And once you do that, if you could take yourself off mute and ask your question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying to do a couple of things. Phil, I'm a retired teacher, and I work with Skipper at Cocoa High. She went over the two questions I had about students who go to a public school or a private school, I'm sorry, and decide that it's not for them, and then they're back at the public school being absorbed by that public school. The money's gone. The money went to the private school, or the student was homeschooled. Mom and dad have to go back to work, or find out the child has special needs that they can't handle. No one can answer the tracking of that money. It is disheartening and gutting to know how many teachers that I've worked with that have quit the profession and have gone to Blue Origin, to Northrop Grumman. It's gutting. The other question or comment I have to make, or question I have to make, is many of our schools that were built in Brevard County were built in the 60s and 70s, and they are showing the wear and tear of being on beachside or just being as old as they are. Air conditioning units are not working. We are sending our teachers and our students into sometimes environments that are not healthy because of problems that are going on with the air conditioning units, and then we're losing this money towards vouchers. It's a disaster waiting to happen.
Well, Gina, thank you very much for the question. And in fact, I think maybe Dr. Dollard might have a quick response to the issue. Follow the money, right? The old saying,
Yeah,
follow the money.
absolutely. Deep Throat was right. Yeah, one of the fundamental confusions, I guess, is, you know, when they were selling this bill, they were saying, oh, the money will just follow the child from the public school to the private school. No worries, no big deal. But the fact of the matter is, most of them never were in public school to begin with. So there is no way for the money to follow the child. The money leaves the school district budget. And, you know, school districts don't turn on a dime. You know, just because there's suddenly 10 kids in a classroom doesn't, you know, you still have to have a teacher there. You still have to have lights on and air. They have to get the bus home. all of those sorts of things. And it's difficult when you don't have control over your front door to properly and responsibly make a budget. I mean, school boards do this, but they're guessing because they don't know exactly how many students it's going to amount to. So I think that recognizing that these monies, one, and the other thing is vouchers are only paid from state funds. So, thank God you have a millage, and you have local resources. But the problem is something's got to give. So those resources have to be expended, as fairly as possible, what remains. And that might mean physical plant is not up to snuff. Uh, School districts around this state are in very serious danger of school closures. I mean, Duval,
Yep.
I'm going to say the number because I'll be wrong, but it's more than 40. They're talking about school closures there. I live in Hillsborough. We're getting ready to close schools. Miami, same thing. And the places that those schools are being closed are where the students live who can least afford to go to another school, and figure out what's the best school for me and how do I get there. And, those are the kids that are most affected by this. So I hope that answers or
Hey,
addresses
Doc,
the question.
a quick question for you. I know that there are published numbers regarding how much educational money is allocated per student in each state. And I know that Florida is pretty much at the bottom of that list as well. Do you know, perchance, what is the number of dollars allocated by the state legislature? And again,
Oh,
this
yes,
is
I definitely do. It is almost $9,000 next year
per student.
per student.
And there's also federal money that comes in. Does
That
federal
includes
money?
federal money.
So
Mhm.
both federal and state money per student,
Local,
$9,000
state,
in the state of Florida.
federal is about $9,000, or will be on average.
How about at the top of the list? Who is it? What states and which states students get the most money per student? Do we know?
Massachusetts is the highest amount.
Massachusetts, New York. Yeah.
And
I'd
it's
be happy to send you the rankings. I probably have them open on my desktop somewhere.
what it does is it reflects which states care most about their kids and which states care about educating their children. And that is, again, show me what your priorities are, show me your budget. And thank you very much. Our next question is going to be from Karen Houston, our president. Karen, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, ladies, once again. But one of the things that I recall going to Tallahassee and being a part of a committee meeting on vouchers, and this has been a few years back. And one of the things that really kind of annoyed me is that I think it's the Step Up program or something. I can't remember what it is. They flooded the room with children, so many children that people that came to speak weren't able to sit. That's one of the tactics they use. But one of the things that came out of that program when some of the speakers got up there was that this particular parent got up and she said that her child was in a school, and I don't know if accredited was the right word for it, whatever, but at the end of their schooling at that particular school they went to, they couldn't graduate, so they had to go back at school. Can you imagine a child who's reached his age of graduation and has to go back to public school so that they can go on to further their education because they were in a school that did not accommodate that? And Vanessa, you also answered what I was going to ask about the ones you answered that before I had a chance to ask that about what happens to those kids that goes back into the public schools. So you already answered that. I don't have to bring that out, but I was concerned about this. I know the money's already in the private school, and when they come back to public school, I wonder what happened to them. So you answered already, but so is that a problem? Have you noticed the problems about those schools that children go to and they get ready to graduate and they can't because they don't qualify for graduation?
I wish I had really solid data on that. And one thing we are collecting, not we, but Pastors for Florida's Children are collecting those stories, because we are starting to hear those things where, higher education is not accepting diplomas as being acceptable for students to go to community college and four-year colleges. So if you know those parents, please have them connect to Pastors for Florida Children to tell their story, because those are the things that are very important. I have data, but when they see me coming legislators, they just roll their eyes like, oh, dollar, Jesus, whatever. Sorry, but they do. But when a parent says, my kid can't go to college, I mean, that's a different story. That's a powerful story, and it's one we need to get out there, that almost 2/3, it's actually, I think, more, but it's like 2/3 of these schools are not accredited at all. And the most they have to have is a background check. I mean, teachers don't have to, they don't need 4-year degrees and taking tests. And so we're sure of what those teachers are able to do. And that is not the case in private schools.
And the last thing I want to add to that too is, it is a privilege to go to Tallahassee. I mean, it's it's a rough deal once you get there. But if any of you that are here that's never been to Tallahassee to visit your legislators or to go into those committee meetings, take a chance. If you see, especially when it's about schools and that sort of thing. So I know the teachers, they've gone on several trips where they had buses that went. So if you have an opportunity for one of those times to get on one of those buses, go and see the process. So
And I might add that you don't necessarily have to wait for the legislative session. What's most important is that you get to know your state representative, your state senator. Their offices are generally near our communities here in Brevard. Our state senator is up in Port Orange, but the reality is that you can actually go to the office and sit down and talk. You surely will talk to a staff member face to face. If you don't want to walk in, you can make a phone call. The League of Women Voters publishes a beautiful little yellow folder that has all of those phone numbers all in one place. I cherish that piece of paper, man. It's the handiest thing to have, because we all should be writing letters, making those phone calls. And I'm telling you, it makes a difference. Put the pressure on your legislator. Send a letter to the governor and let them know that you are not happy with the fact that they're not prioritizing students. By the way, we had another speaker who dropped out of the list here, and you're listed as Stop Moms for Liberty. If you could do me a favor and take yourself off mute and introduce yourself, and then ask your question. You have the floor.
There was someone before me, I think. I don't know, whatever. I guess we got out of order. I have two questions. The first one for Noreen. You were going over some of the items that we've been trying to alert people to across the country, right? This misuse of voucher money. And you gave some examples of Disney World tickets, kayaks, and so forth. So what is, and I may have missed it when you said it, but I don't think I caught it. What is the actual requirement and what is being approved of these things? Because our understanding is there is very little accountability and those things are being approved.
Yes, you are correct. There is very little accountability. If you would like, and I can look this up quickly, but the Step Up for Students and AAA is the other scholarship funding organization in Florida. I mean, they both publish, guidelines for purchasing, but it's quite generous, the things that can be purchased using these ESA, the Educational Savings Account dollars.
Awesome. I did email you, so hopefully you can send that off to me. And then Vanessa, a couple of things. So we know that it's a perfect storm in the state of Florida right now, right? So what can we do in Brevard when we have a school board in place that really doesn't want to move the needle on the appreciation of teachers at all. And I know you're limited in the things that you can say publicly. I understand that. But then my next piece of that is, can we count on the union to be endorsing the pro-public school candidates like Dr. Taylor that's on our call here tonight this time around? Because last time I really do think that that hurt election process, that they were not giving endorsements.
So our organization is a Democratic organization. We are made up of teachers from all belief systems, from all political parties. And we have what is called a Tiger PAC. So that's our political action committee. And it is made up of people. There will be a process where candidates will be offered the opportunity to fill out a questionnaire and come in for an interview. And then our committee votes to offer an endorsement or not offer an endorsement. And so that's not something that I can tell you, because it is not the Vanessa show. It is a Democratic organization, and decisions are not made in isolation or by one person. I can say, I would hope this would be an appropriate time to plug, there will be a candidate forum on May 15th at the Space Coast Realtors. It is going to be co-moderated by myself and Giles Malone from the Space Coast Daily. And that is, you know, in an effort to get all parties in the room, which is what happened the last time around. And so that is going to be something that we hold. So I would encourage everybody to attend that forum. Our nomination or our endorsement process is private to our organization and those that are members of our Tiger Political Action Committee for BFT.
And Vanessa, once again, could you say there's the 15th of which month at the school board forum?
May 15th. I believe that's a Wednesday.
Okay.
All
and
my dates are running together. It's going to be at the Space Coast Association of Realtors, which is located right there off of Pineda Causeway. Doors will open at 5. District 3 will debate at 5:30. District 4 will debate at 6. And there will be a straw poll at 6:30. There might be some wiggle room for times there, because obviously there's 2 candidates in the District 3 race. There are 4 candidates in the District 4 race. So that's the time schedule. So we hope to be able to stick within that time, but we know District 4 might be a little bit longer just because there's more candidates in that race. So we would encourage everybody to participate and attend.
And I would like to remind everybody that's here on the Zoom to please take a look at the chat, because the chat is filling with good information. It's got contacts that you can click on. It's got, one of the things I just did is I was taking pictures of it, because it's got a lot of good information that's populating in there for candidates and that sort of thing. And by the way, the woman that was just speaking on behalf of people against Moms for Liberty, could you please identify yourself?
Yes, I'm sorry, I apologize. It's Liz Mkhitaryan, and I live in Titusville, and I'm glad that Vanessa brought up the example of Temple Christian School.
Thank you, Liz. Thank
That's
you
all
very
I'll
much
say
for
about
being
that.
good. Thank you for your good question, and thank you for being here. Next speaker with a hand raised, and thank you for being patient, Suzanne Taylor, president of the League of Women Voters of the Space
League
Coast.
of Women Voters. Yes, thank you. My question for either speaker or both speakers is, are there any public interest lawsuits pending regarding HB1 or any of this voucher nonsense?
Not to my knowledge.
None?
We
shocked.
have we have sued the state of Florida on the vouchers before, and we've spent quite a bit of money on those lawsuits, and we all know who appoints the judges. We've had you know, Governor DeSantis appointing judges. We've had Rick Scott appointing judges, Charlie Crist and Jeb Bush before him. So we can all probably understand the judges that have been appointed. And so we have not been successful And so that is not where, you know, as far as an organization of Florida Education Association is concerned, especially with, and there's a reason legislature coming after us and trying to dismantle us and trying to take us down, because we are fighting about that. But that is not something our organization can put money towards at this time, because we are fighting to stay alive. And like I said, I'm very proud of Brevard County. I'm very proud of the Brevard Federation of Teachers. We have really strong networks of membership in our schools and our building representatives, and we're going to survive these attacks. But we've got brothers and sisters all over the state that they're in a really tenuous position with the laws. So that is not something that we can afford alone as an organization to fight against at this time, especially when we've lost in the past.
Right, understood. So all the lawsuits that the Brevard Federation of Teachers have filed have been state lawsuits, not federal lawsuits?
Well, so it depends on, so you have to have standing in court, right? So you have to, we have very smart lawyers, smarter than me, who work with us on a state and national level to decide where we're going to have the best opportunities, where we'll have standing, and you know, where we've been able to pursue certain issues. And so you know, for our particular fight as far as a union, yes, that, you know, could be settled in federal court.
Okay, I guess I'm thinking more like a separation of church and state kind of argument, which would be more federal, but that wouldn't be something that you all would do, I guess.
Our legal
Okay,
teams
thank you. I
have,
appreciate it.
yeah, yep.
Yeah, the Freedom from Religion Foundation actually works on that topic quite heavily. There are other organizations that do. It's an ongoing challenge, not just here in our county, but throughout the nation. Something I think it's worth clarifying is that Vanessa was saying that the Brevard Federation of Teachers, NEA, is a Democratic organization. That's a small d Democratic organization. They are not part of the Democratic Party.
You.
They are
You,
a very participatory. Every teacher has a say. Every educator has a say. They really care about their workers, about their brothers and their sisters, and making sure that everybody is represented. So it's a very small d Democratic organization. And
Thank you for saying that, Phil. I appreciate it. Yes, small d.
It's good to be clarified.
Yeah. Our membership is about 30-30-30 when you're looking at the breakdown of Republican, Democrat, nonpartisan. So, yeah, thank you for clarifying that.
You're very welcome. And our next speaker is Bonnie Edis. She's our SCPA Vice President. Bonnie, you have the floor. The challenge is to get unmuted.
Yeah.
There you go. You're up.
I was just wondering if this problem, the extent of the vultures is the same in any other state. And it seems that you were talking about that the finance doesn't just come from the state, but from the federal and local sources. Could you compare that a little bit for us?
Sure. So Arizona was the first state to pass universal vouchers a year ahead of us. I always say that when I'm on a panel presentation with my colleague Beth Lewis in Arizona, that it's not fair when she gets to go first, because the only thing I get to say is, yeah, and here we are in Florida 1 year later, because we've had the same experience that they did. There was vast underestimation of cost put forth from the powers that be that was quickly overrun. They have the same issues with accountability and just this spiraling of the budgetary impact faced. There are now 2 other states that have universal vouchers, North Carolina, and it's in every state, in almost every state, there is some form of voucher. And so we're still somewhat early days on this, and in terms of the wide range of it. We're working, I mean, we at FPI are going to try to put together projections because we were pretty bang on with our initial when we put our cost study together last year. And the reason was because we had Arizona, so we knew how many homeschoolers would take up vouchers. We knew how many private school kids would take vouchers, and they did. And they are, and their accountants would tell them they're stupid not to, because it's free money. So yeah, we're definitely not alone in this struggle. And as far as education funding as a whole, education is funded by state, local, and federal. Local provides the largest amount of this funding pie. As things stand right now, only state dollars can be used for vouchers in Florida. So, which means that localities and, they have to pick up the slack. Does that help?
Yeah, exactly. And I just one curious thing, are any of these states fighting back and trying to?
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean the accountability piece is huge. I can't remember what state it is. It's not Arizona, but in one state government who runs the vouchers, their DOE, their Department of Education runs vouchers themselves. They have staff that was complicit in these in these ghost children that don't even exist who are getting vouchers, and there were a number of indictments within that state department. I don't know. You'll have to email me and I'll look it up, but because I can't remember offhand. But it's so rife for abuse. Yeah.
Thank you.
Vanessa, would you like to add anything to that?
I think one of the things, and Noreen, I'm going to ask you to help me out to make sure I don't misspeak on this. So with the Hope Scholarship, or some of the tax credit scholarships, when you're purchasing a vehicle, they will actually ask you if you want to make a contribution to to the scholarship, and they get a tax credit for diverting their tax dollars or whatever. So the taxes that they would pay to the state, they're not paying at all because it's going into the scholarship program. And then also they have to ask you if you want to contribute, and they'll couch it with, do you want to contribute to the Hope Scholarship? Do you want to stop kids from getting bullied? And so you're buying a car and you're like, yeah, of course, I don't want kids to get bullied. Yeah, of course, I want, I'll contribute to a scholarship. You can say no, I don't want to do that. They actually have to fill out paperwork saying that they asked you if you wanted to contribute. And so, the last time I bought a vehicle, I took the time, I'd already been at the dealership for like 4 or 5 hours because they keep you there all day. And I said, let me tell you about the Hope Scholarship. And so, I sat there and made my salesman listen to me. He'd already made the sale, but, he said he didn't know that. And if I believe, and this is where I'm not sure, but I believe if they don't ask the consumer and they don't fill out the paperwork saying they asked it and submit it to the state, they're actually fined, and that fine goes to the scholarship fund. So it is all sorts of racketish all over the place.
Definitely.
You're saying that by state law that if you buy a car in the state of Florida that you have to, or they have to do this. This is state law. All car dealers in in Florida have to do this.
Yes.
This is insanity.
Yeah. And I didn't real. I thought that was new to 1403 this year. Because I know I bought a car 2 years ago or so. And I didn't even notice. I mean, you're there and you're just like, you've been there for hours and you're just signing paper. I don't remember anything about a car being related to vouchers. I wasn't doing this work then. But it definitely is a thing, and they definitely have to, now they have to tell you. And what I would say is call your legislator and say, this is what I want. That we have to say, okay, we have to include public schools in that, and say, no, so you can say, oh, I would like to make a donation to Merritt Island Junior High or whatever, in the amount of whatever the credit would be. I think that would be an excellent step for someone to take. Just to slow them down, if nothing else.
This is another action item for us. I'm making little notes of our action items, and
Yeah.
we are winding down. I see we have one last question, and I think then we're going to talk about action items, and then we're going to proceed. So back to our friend from Moms for Stop Moms for Liberty. Please forgive me, I've forgotten your name.
Yeah, very different. Yeah, back to Vanessa. Thank you for answering the question about the union. So the first part of what I asked is, what can we do in Brevard? Because we know the climate at the school district with the current board, the current superintendent. I don't see them working on a plan to address this at all. Are you seeing that? Because what I see is our board stuck in culture wars and, you know, things of that nature. I don't see a plan for Brevard, and I'm very worried because I am seeing all the other counties and all the other places across the United States that are closing schools because of this kind of fallout. And I really don't see them working on it. Are you seeing any of that? And if not, is there anything that all of us in the public can do to prompt them to do that?
A great question.
So, what I would encourage everyone to do, and I said it earlier, we go back to the negotiating table next week, on Thursday, at 3 p.m. We live stream our negotiations from the Brevard Federation of Teachers YouTube page. Please watch us. Please follow along, and you can watch how the district's negotiating team responds to us, and email your school board members, talk to them about it, and, you know, let them know that you learned about vouchers. Let them know that you learned how much more money they're going to have to spend on that. I can say, and it is certainly not a Band-Aid. Well, it's probably a Band-Aid over a gaping wound, right? But the fact that we have the half cent here locally, the fact that we have the millage, those have provided somewhat of a stopgap. When we got the half cent, that stopped them robbing Peter to pay Paul, because they were siphoning money out of the operating fund and putting it into the capital budget. And the operating fund is how they pay teacher salaries. So the half cent kind of stopped that bleed, right? The millage coming in did obviously add to teacher salary, but what we want to make sure happens in Brevard is that the school board and the district, and we would love our community to put pressure on them to make sure that raises continue. Just because we have millage, we cannot say, oh, you guys just got a raise, you have the millage, we're good to go, because we know the millage has to be voted on in 4 years. And historically, across the state of Florida, if a district has gotten millage, they have not lost it, but we don't want to bank on that. So we have to make sure that the school district is still budgeting appropriately to give raises. So I would ask that everybody puts pressure on our school board members. They put pressure on the district, that you watch our negotiations closely and you say, I'm a community member, I'm watching, this is what I heard BFT say, this is what I heard the district say, what are you doing? How are you going to make sure we don't keep bleeding teachers?
And
Teacher
you'll be
retention
talking
is a
about
huge
vouchers?
problem.
You'll be discussing vouchers during that process of negotiation?
During our negotiating process, no, but I mean, it most
I mean,
likely
it
will
seems to
come
me
up
like,
at some
yeah, it's a
point.
bargaining point.
Yeah, it most
Yeah.
likely will come up at some point, and it probably will be the district using it as a reason not to pay us. If I had to venture a guess, but you know.
Well, maybe you
Um,
can get to the issue before they do. And I
maybe
do,
they'll come to the table and accept our first offer.
who knows? I know, we can dream, right? And I
Yeah.
do want to double down on what Vanessa said about the 200 vacancies. And I would encourage all of you to use a strategy that we're using across the nation. When you talk about teacher vacancies, don't talk about that number. Talk about, we have 200 vacancies. That funnels out to 6,000 students in Brevard do not have a teacher that is fully qualified and subject expert in front of them. And that's where it is just astounding to me that, you know, my profession, I'm now retired, but my profession is under attack, and we do need to fight back. So thank you, Vanessa, and thank you, Noreen.
Well, I couldn't have said that any better. It's a great way to start winding down our event. It is time for me to very quickly talk about action items. Making a few notes here, and I'm going to ask both of our speakers to follow along with me. One of the things that I know that you've said, an action item, is a very personal action item for all of us, and that is, if you're in a conversation or you hear somebody talking about, hey, you know, private schools are better, stop the conversation and say, prove it. The proof is really in the pudding. And what you'll find is that when you go look at the metrics, our public school systems are highly rated, highly qualified, and many of these private schools are failing, have closed, have struggled. They've had their children, that their graduates rejected from community colleges or universities. So you know what? Let's be honest with each other. So private is not always better. Another item is to vote yes on millage and the half cent to public schools when those items come up on the voting, because elections have consequences. Elections have consequences. Vote for people running for office who support public schools, support our teachers. I think that's a good action item. One of the things that we just heard was calling your legislator and saying that when you're buying a car, this opportunity to support public schools, quote unquote, really is to fund these school voucher programs, and people need to be aware of that. And maybe the law should be changed so that you have a separate funding. If you want to have, if I buy a car locally here, let's say in Cocoa, the money goes to support the Tigers, the actual high school in Cocoa. Here on Merritt Island, the Merritt Island Mustangs could sure use money from every car sale, and rather than it going to a voucher program. Monitor another action item is to monitor the BFT negotiations. Look at the YouTube page. Be sure to pressure our legislators to and our school board to support our teachers. And I'm going to ask very quickly if either of you have any other action items that you would like our guests, our listeners or viewers to take with them.
I would say also monitor your school board meetings. You know, as Vanessa said, you can go read their agendas, see what they're up to. And if you can't get your body down there, then you could probably watch them on YouTube or whatever the live stream is that your county uses. Definitely do that. Connect to other people who are working in this space. The League of Women Voters has education action teams that are very, I know the state one is very active, and I'm sure there's members from Brevard. And if you're wondering about nonpartisan school board races, that's on the ballot. It's one of the amendments. There are resources on the State League website about that and evaluating school board candidates. So I'll be quiet. Go ahead, Vanessa.
And by the way, I see that we should remind everybody to go to floridapolicy.org, and it's spelled out floridapolicy.org. If you're looking for information from the Florida Policy Institute, this is a great resource for factual information to support whatever letter you're going to write, whatever phone call you might make, or whatever statement you might make at a board meeting. Back to Vanessa. An action item that we haven't covered?
I agree with all those action items, Phil, and yes, please visit the Florida Policy website. Also, feaweb.org is a great website. That is our state website, and I'll put that in the chat as well. And that actually during session is a great way to stay. I don't think it linked. Oops, I think I sent it straight to you, Noreen. I shouldn't try to talk and send links at the same time. So, all right, thank you. It's feaweb.org, and you can actually during session, it has live look at the session, what's happening every day, what time, what chamber, what bills being heard. You click on the links, it gives you talking points. You can sign up to participate on Tuesdays during session. We have Power Hour, where we have people across the state that join a Zoom, and we target legislatures. So we might call 5 legislators or email them and target the people that are in the different committee meetings. So that is definitely a website that I would visit to stay in touch with that. As far as VFT, we do have a website, vftteach.org. It's geared really towards members, but you're welcome to visit it. We usually, obviously during session for legislative, refer to our state union, Florida Education Association.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. And one of the things that we always like to leave our meetings with is the idea that the program must not end here. For those of you that are here and watching this, those of you that are on YouTube watching this program, if you just shut off the TV, you shut off your program and you go do something else and you keep it to yourself, we have failed. The essence is that we ask you, we please use the information you have learned here tonight to influence somebody else, to bring up the conversation at the water cooler, so to speak. Share it with your neighbors and your family to understand what this is all about and how critically important it is, not only to our community and our country, but our entire species, really. If we fail to educate our young people, then we are all doomed to face the consequences of that. So it is incumbent on all of us to share this information. Our next First Thursday program will be called Your Vote, Your Voice, Thursday, June 6th. That's on D-Day, June 6th. And so we ask you to please join us for that. I'm going to ask all of our participants, everybody here in the audience, please bring yourself up off of mute and give our speakers, Dr. Noreen Dollard, PhD, Senior Policy Analyst, Florida Policy Institute, and Director of Kids Count, and Vanessa Skipper, Vice President, Brevard Federation of Teachers. Let's give them a round of applause. Everybody, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We are so glad and so lucky to have you in our world. Thank you for being here for us tonight. Good night, everyone. We thank you for joining us tonight. We'll see you next month.
Thank you. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Good night. Have a beautiful evening. And by the way, don't forget that rocket launch. The rocket is going to fly at 9:49 p.m. 9:49 from Slick 40.